What's up, my friends? I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and we are on, I think, our third day of looking at this very contentious exchange between the Pharisees and Sadducees, who formed an unholy alliance to oppose Jesus, setting aside their ideological differences to eliminate this common enemy. And they come and they ask something that seems pretty innocuous. Will you just do another miraculous sign for us? And Jesus, no doubt thinking back to the 11 billion miraculous signs that he just got done doing, is like, how about no? No. You can read the signs. You see how the things are. You can look at the sky and tell what's going to happen with the weather. You're perfectly competent. No. A wicked and adulterous generation looks for a miraculous sign, but none will be given it except the sign of Jonah. And today we're going to break down more about that wicked and adulterous stuff and about the sign of Jonah and what it means in this context. I'm going to ask my dear friend Jeff to play some music, and then we're going to get after it. Jesus never really did ever debate these guys, did he? There's no moment where Jesus is like, all right, I have to face down my logical opponents, and we are going to put a neutral observer over there. They're going to judge the whole thing. We're going to get note cards out. They're going to say things. And after they make their 8 points, I'm going to have to make sure to rebut those 8 points. Then I get to go on the offensive for a while. That structure never seems to occur. And I think that's really interesting, too, because, I mean, come on, regardless of what political, social persuasion you lean toward these days, there's stuff going on that just doesn't make a lick of sense from time to time. Stuff that is dumb and malicious, bad faith arguments. And by bad faith, I don't mean that isn't what I thought before you said those words already, therefore bad. I mean, you know what it sounds like when someone makes a good faith argument arguing for something that you don't believe or think. You also know what it sounds like when someone makes a bad faith, dishonest argument arguing for something you don't already think. And when you see that bad faith stuff, like what we get here in Matthew 16 going on, I at least feel this impulse to, and this is a phrase I've been using in my private conversation a lot lately, to ride out to meet them. What can men do against such madness? Ride out to meet them, and I want to do that, and I want to fight sometimes. Then what I find is that it is almost never fruitful when I go and do that. There is something more potent about calmly associating yourself with people who make good faith arguments in agreement and disagreement, trying to handle your business the right way in terms of how you treat people, treating ideas with scrutiny and relentlessness, including your own, while treating people with gentleness and care and collegiality. Ideas should be treated ruthlessly. People should be treated well. But at the exact same time that I'm feeling a bunch of those impulses over the last year and a half, you and I have been hanging out doing this. And I keep looking at the example of Jesus and his strategy, his shrewd as serpents, innocent as doves strategy that he embraced was to call things out directly and not get suckered into an impossible, unending quagmire debate where even if you win, it's going to be a Pyrrhic victory. The principles behind the examples of his engagement are very compelling to me and have served even as something of a restraint on my impulse to wade out into the deep, wide world and fight with everybody about everything right now. That said, Jesus seems to be rolling with the principle he explained in Matthew chapter 7, where it wasn't even a principle, it was a command. Don't put your pearls, don't put your precious stuff before swine and dogs. They'll turn on you and devour you. Well, that's exactly what he's doing right here. He has judged the situation and has realized that this do it again is not a little kid. Do it again, Daddy. It's the incredulous, difficult, bad faith, combative. Do it again. Yeah, prove it. One more time. I haven't seen anything yet. Do it one more time. It's that tone. And he's simply not going to reward it and play along. And in doing so, bastardize things that are meaningful and beautiful in an attempt to persuade people who've already demonstrated exactly where they're coming from, and at least in this moment and recent moments have demonstrated significant bad faith and malice in how they engage. That rebuke in chapter 12, where Jesus calls them a wicked and adulterous generation, seemed kind of mean, a little bit off tone at that point in the conversation. But now that we've got 4 more chapters under our belt and we see that these people just want to fight about everything all the time, Jesus cannot possibly get it right unless he apologizes, kisses the ring and just says, I will say all of your words and do all of your things however you want them done, the larger sample size we get of their bad faithiness, the more Jesus calling them out looks like he was maybe seeing them for what they were a little quicker than you and I as audience members were seeing them for what they were. And again, by the time he uses the same phrase, wicked and adulterous generation, in chapter 16, you and I in the audience have seen enough that we're going to be much more likely to say, well, yeah, he might have a point there. At any rate, Jesus rounds the whole thing out by saying, you're not going to be given any sign except for the sign of Jonah. Like these other people, the Canaanite lady, she gets a sign. Her daughter's going to be healed. That centurion, he gets a sign. The miracle he wanted to happen, transcending distance, that's going to happen. That lady who was bleeding, she gets a sign. She's not going to be bleeding anymore. And now she's going to be ritually pure and able to participate in church and sacrifices and all of that kind of business. They get signs. You guys are going to get one sign and one sign only, and that is the sign of Jonah. Now, again, over here in Matthew chapter 12, we have almost the exact same exchange. I suppose it's possible that the repetition here occurs because they asked the same question. Jesus is not budging. He's going to give them the exact same answer. But there is one key distinction between the two scenarios here. In the first scenario, you just had Pharisees and some nebulous teachers of the law. Well, Pharisees and teachers of the law, they would have not balked necessarily on its face at the idea of Jesus referencing resurrection. So that wasn't their point of contention with Jesus. And in chapter 12, Jesus fleshes out the not being able to read the sign. Nineveh saw the amazing thing and they were like, okay, cool, we'll repent, back in the book of Jonah. Jesus is saying, you Pharisees, you're seeing the sign and you're not repenting. But over in chapter 16, Jesus is talking to a different crowd. Remember, the Pharisees and the Sadducees have created an unholy alliance from the two far ends of the religious political spectrum to come together to oppose Jesus. The Sadducees, well, one of their distinguishing features is that they did not believe in any type of resurrection, and they went back and forth all the time with the Pharisees over this point. So is it possible that Jesus is going right back to this thing to drive a wedge between these two parties, to point out to the room maybe just how ridiculous and fraudulent and not good faith this apparent alliance is? By referencing the sign of Jonah again, he's pointing out something that these two parties wildly disagree on. It would be like if there was a bad faith coalition that emerged between QAnon, MAGA, crazy far-right types and your wildly progressive social justice warrior, everything is offensive, new morality types, and they come together because they have some common cause that they want to accomplish, and then the person who they're attacking throws something out like, the only sign you'll be given is the sign of the Second Amendment. Or if the person being attacked said, the only sign you'll be given is the sign of transgender bathrooms. You don't need my help to spell out what's going to happen to this rough coalition that has been assembled of far-right and far-left mentalities. That's pulling the pin out of a grenade and rolling it into the room and then just stepping out the door. They're going to have to fight about the things that they fight about all the time by touching on a hot-button issue that the two sides deeply disagree on. It's going to highlight how very different they are and raise the question for all bystanders. What are these people up to? What would cause them to come together on this? Is this really of good faith? And this is one of those places, again, where, of course, I could be reading into this wildly, and maybe that wasn't the intent at all, but I kind of suspect it was, and I'm going to choose to give Jesus credit for being off the charts socially smart and finding ways to point out the ridiculousness of the competing ideologies without ever engaging in a fruitless, lengthy debate. He just keeps doing things that are good and inarguably redemptive, and pointing out how destructive and inarguably not redemptive and false the stuff from the people who reject him is. I want to talk with you more about this Africa Renewal thing. This is a group that I've been aware of for quite a while now. I know people who are involved with it who I think very, very highly of. And through them, I've become aware of the need and the situation in Uganda, especially over the last year. I've been to Uganda a couple times. I've been to that neck of the woods. Things like nourishment and education and healthcare for kids are not an automatic. Education is not free. If a child wants an education, a family has to come up with money. But Uganda, at last check, is dealing with 80% unemployment. So this feels like the kind of thing that unless there's some kind of intervention, you're just going to see the same struggles cycle through again and again and again in this country. And there are a lot of reasons that the situation has been difficult, not least among those has been political corruption, civil violence, there's an HIV/AIDS crisis, and then, the stuff that I just told you about. So I love that Africa Renewal is just trying to do something simple. We have talked for a long time about some kind of partnership. They have wanted to get behind what I'm doing here. I have been behind what they're doing over there and continue to be. So in the most literal of senses, Africa Renewal is sponsoring the TMBH podcast as I am sponsoring Africa Renewal. And just to go right through the front door, I hope you will consider sponsoring a kid in Uganda for $40 a month. That $40 is used to address the food problem that kid is dealing with right now. It puts more and better food in their belly. It helps to address the education funding problem. It gets them the resources they need to get an education starting at a very young age. And it provides access to health care. $40 can go a mile in that part of the world right now. And in addition to the individual redemptive beauty of being able to reach into the life of one kid in another part of the world and make a tremendous difference, there's also a more corporate vision here that Africa Renewal has, and that is, let's try to make Uganda better. I mean, what happens if you connect with enough of these kids and you get them sponsored? I don't know why I framed that as a rhetorical question. I mean, there's an answer to the question. The answer is that Uganda gets better from the inside out. And that style of solution and that promise of success is something that I am very excited to be investing in. And I hope you'll consider it too. If you want to check it out, you can go to africarenewal.org/TMBH. I'll tell you straight up, they've got 1,000 kids right now who are waiting to be sponsored. 1,000. Like, that's literally the actual number. And I told them that I would try to help. So I hope you'll consider it. And I hope we get some of those kids sponsored and make a difference in their lives. I promise I won't waste your time bringing stupid things that I don't believe in to you. If I take time out of the podcast to bring something like this to you, it's because I think it's a really good idea, and I appreciate you thinking about it. Again, it's africarenewal.org/TMBH. All right, we'll land the plane there. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.